Yep, you read that title correctly. I'm going to sit here and explain to you that the show SpongeBob SquarePants actually has a socialist perspective to view it. Now, before we continue, I should point out the fact that I do not believe that Steven Hillenburg or the writers of the show overall had some secret socialist messaging in the show, unlike other fan theories. Well, I mean, except for that one time, but we'll get to that when we get to that. This is more of just alternate perspective that you can view the show under. And since I am making a video of it, I'm going to say that it does make a little bit of sense. It is outlined in a Reddit post by the user, I am not going to be caught on mic saying those words, which outlines their interpretation of supposed socialist symbolism of each of the main SpongeBob characters. I'll link to the original post so that you can read it for yourself because it's a whole lot long and some make more sense than others, but let's go over the ones that have the smallest amount of evidence. First, there's Mrs. Puff. She represents the failure of the current education system. Yeah, there's a reason why I started with her first, because hers is really just like and this is also a thing. As if the user just decided to add another character because they felt that it would make their post more legitimate. Sandy Cheeks represents a scientific socialist utopia, which is very interesting considering the fact that she's from Texas. But aside from that, I can't really see anything that would disprove that interpretation. Plankton represents an automated capitalist dystopia, which makes sense because he mostly tries to use his science and gadgets to try and steal a popular brand to become rich, which in his mind basically leads to world domination. Ray Kroc would be very proud. Patrick Star represents the lumpen proletariat, which for those who have no clue what that term means, is basically what Marx called the lower classes of society who had absolutely zero interest in class consciousness and thus should be rejected from the people who should be pushing for class consciousness in the workers' revolution, which kind of makes sense considering Patrick is dumb and lazy and has absolutely nothing to gain from anything of this. However, the Redditor argues that actually Patrick is supposed to represent a more positive view on the lumpen proletariat, like the interpretation from theorists after the likes of Bakunin. It's not that he doesn't have the drive to do it. Patrick and the lumpen do have drive, but the drive is not what you want it to be. They just want to live their life in peace and have fun. But arguably the most compelling case for this theory or interpretation or whatever you want to call it comes from the relationship between three of the show's most prominent characters: SpongeBob, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs. We'll start off with Eugene himself. Mr. Krabs represents a capitalist bourgeoisie boss who will screw over his employees any chance he gets, make them work 24/7 for low or sometimes no wages while he rakes in all the profit from their labor. Meanwhile, Squidward and SpongeBob represent the workers. However, they represent different types of workers. Squidward is a class-conscious worker who is into finer things like interior decorating, art, music. You know, things that do have the stereotype of being predominantly liked by left-wingers and such. His job at the Krusty Krab is really just a job to him. While yes, Squidward does have the capitalistic dreams of the aristocratic life of fame and fortune, but it's only because his boss treats him so poorly that he feels like that's his only escape. And the character that the show's named after represents the blind worker who is taught the age-old adage, whatever the boss says, goes, to the point where he seems to have a sort of father-son relationship with his boss. And this leads to a lot of animosity between Squidward and SpongeBob. You see, Squidward wants to be class-conscious and wants to fight for the workers, but SpongeBob is just happy with his job. He's happy working for pennies because he likes what he's doing. He's blind to the fact that he's literally getting screwed by Mr. Krabs every single day. Even though his job description is fry cook, he also mops the floors, tars the parking lot, helps Mr. Krabs build a telescope off hours. And again, this is for little to no money. And it's shown in many, many episodes that without him, the business goes done, and despite this, he's still treated as extremely expendable. Squidward can see this very transparently, but he hates the fact that SpongeBob doesn't and/or doesn't care. And that, of course, leads to Squidward and SpongeBob both not being able to get any better conditions because they don't actually work together to try and fix their conditions. Well, except for that one episode that not only shows that happening, but perfectly exemplifies the relationship that this Reddit post explains. In order for me to explain why this shows it, I'm gonna have to go into a bit of a plot synopsis, so bear with me. After what appears to be a normal day of work, Mr. Krabs reveals that he's gonna start charging his employees for quote-unquote goofing off. SpongeBob, being blind, of course just says, "Aight," but Squidward, being class conscious, says, "I'm not doing that," and decides that him and SpongeBob will go on strike. Cartoony shenanigans ensue. Right off the bat, you can kind of see, yeah, this is pretty much just the theory in action. A bunch of workers going on strike, with the characters literally falling into the archetypes I just laid down. It is pretty socialist minding. Even down to the title card, which has a theme song that kind of resembles old Union songs. Granted, it's supposed to be a parody of the Johnny Paycheck song, "Take This Job and Shove It," but songs like that do seem to be at least part of the same trend of the next gen of not Union songs, but like songs that are referencing Union songs. You know, the instrument choices and the lyrics and such. And one part of this episode you may be very familiar with is a speech that Squidward made that was memed nonstop. Typically by putting the USSR anthem over it, and actually listening to the speech, you'll realize, yeah, the meme makes total sense. I'd play a clip, but you know how Viacom is, so instead I'm going to be reciting the speech. "The gentle laborer shall no longer suffer from the noxious greed of Mr. Krabs. We will dismantle oppression board by board. We'll saw the foundation of big business in half, even if it takes an eternity. With your support, we will send the hammer of the people's will clashing through the windows of Mr. Krabs' house of servitude." Now again, I'm not going to claim that this show had like huge Marxist symbolism that was waiting to be uncovered, that was going to like push kids to be a lot more class conscious. I'm not going to be like that guy that made that 1-hour video about the fact that people in Bikini Bottom wear each other's skins. This is just another way to view a show that has basically built the childhoods of an entire generation of children. But I assume some other SpongeBob theorists would admit that the pieces are there. We just have to figure out how the pieces fit together. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.